Thank you for taking the time to join AOBIL's Career Development webinar, where we will explore what forms of online training actually deliver value. The fact that you are here shows that you are committed to self-development and career progression, so welcome. I would like to introduce you to our presenter for this webinar. He is the founder of AOBIL and is a highly regarded educator and author with 17 published books. He has delivered more than 300 seminars and courses. That adds up to over 1,000 full days of speaking and coaching. His focus now is on delivering training and education to people who are committed to developing their careers and lifestyles, and to do so using the technology we have at our fingertips. Please welcome George Lee Sye.
Well, hi everyone. Thank you, Sheena. Welcome along to this webinar of ours. And to get us started, what I'll do is explain how we're going to approach it. The structure of the webinar is that we've broken it up into 4 parts. Number 1, we're going to talk about the drive for online training. Number 2, we'll talk about where online fails and give you some tips about the things that you look for. Number 3, we'll talk about where online succeeds, and again, give you some tips for the kind of criteria that successful online programs must meet. And then we'll close out with talking about the value proposition of online training. So what is it that is driving this quest for online? The way that we see it, there are 4 key drivers. Number 1, there's extreme competition in the market today. People and individuals, organizations, any business, and approach any market as part of that. With globalization, that means we have greater access to the free market in the Western world predominantly. There's a much greater drive for focus on the work that we're doing as a result of this, as opposed to a lot of the peripheral activities around human resource development. Number 2, the exponential nature of technology growth. The speed and volume of information that's now available for us, or to us, because of technology means that we're exposed to mass circulation instead of directed information. So in the old days of where a report or a letter was directed to an individual, now they tend to be rained down upon us so that we're exposed to a ton of information. The third driver is the economic shifts that have occurred over the past decade. There are shrinking margins, and in many industries, the price of their services have gone downwards. There's short-term tenures in business, which are driving shorter-term goals. And as Jim Collins, who's the author of Good to Great, says, talks about, this theory of time spans of focus are incorrect today, because the reality is that as everybody is now focused on short-term time frames, few leaders are able to operate entirely in time frames relevant to their position. Number 4, and that's the internet the way it is today. The vast majority of the population are online and they have internet access, and their behaviours are altering very quickly through internet banking, through shopping online, through paying bills, and whatever they do from an online perspective. They're even building fridges now with the ability to be able to fill the fridge directly from the front door. So the online world is affecting us in a lot of ways. We all agree that these drivers are impacting all of us individually and as organisations. So what is the real effect? Well, what I've done here is I've kind of layered some boxes here which indicate what I see as the 6 main effects of this, which are layering on top of one another. Number 1, we're overwhelmed with information and external stimulus. Number 2, our time is compressed. Number 3, there's a fundamental desire for short-term results. Number 4, costs are constrained, and this is generally the first strategy for improvement. And if you look at the amount of work that organisations such as McKinsey's are getting in cost-cutting initiatives in business, it's testament to the fact that cost is the primary point of focus for improvement in the current environment. Number 5, training is a nice to have, not because I say it is or consider it that way, but because that's the way it's being perceived in business. And if you look at what is driving the focus at the moment, it's all about costs and business and work, as opposed to the nice to haves, which training seems to fit within that category. And the last thing is we're building a comfort with online information access and online transactions. But our real quandary is this: we still need to grow and expand our skills and knowledge. We all know that. When we don't do that, we fall behind, we don't know what we don't know, our resumes expand at a slower rate, we end up with gaps in what we present as self-development. And we might say that we're committed to growth to a potential employer, and we're, totally aligned with the concepts of self-betterment and organisation and betterment, but we're often challenged to be able to show it in those resumes. So what about online training? IBIS World analyst David Whitcross. Now, IBIS World is a research organisation, and one of their analysts is David Whitcross, who says that online education was increasingly prominent in postgraduate education in the United States, including formal programs such as masters. Now, graduates need accreditation and they're usually not working, so the face-to-face classroom type engagement seems to fit that group of people who are leaving school and haven't really entered the workforce. Whereas a postgraduate puts less importance on the accreditation, as well as the fact that they are less motivated to actually take time off work. So the postgraduate area seems to be where the greatest online part of it, the greatest online growth is occurring. Now, in 2001, a study by the Sloan Consortium found that 6 million students in the US are taking at least one online course, and that's nearly 1/3 of all students enrolled in higher education. And the interesting thing is that's driving a next generation of people who have a strong positive association with online education. And I don't know if you're aware of it, but China is home to 70 different online colleges, and that number is going to grow in the coming years in order to meet the high demand for online learning opportunities. And countries such as China are going to push not only throughout their own geographical area, but they're going to push internationally and start to dominate that sphere. Now, does online offer a better solution? Okay, well, it does fit within our needs at the moment, because it provides ease of access in terms of when we can do training and where we can do training. It also offers considerable flexibility in that you can undertake a training course and you can pace yourself through it as it suits you. You could do 2 or 3 hours per day of study, or you could reduce it to 30 minutes, depending on the structure of the course. Number 3, there's a growing acceptance. In that 2001 Sloan Consortium study, they found that while there has been a slow increase in the proportion of academic leaders that have a positive view of the relative quality of the learning outcomes for online courses as compared to comparable face-to-face courses, there remains a consistent and sizable minority that see online as inferior. And what they're saying is that the amount of people who are now seeing online as a worse option than classroom, it's funny that they approach it this way, but this is the words they use, that is a minority group, and it's shrinking. So more and more people are accepting that online is a fundamental part of the way that people should be educated. And if you look at the education process that is occurring in Eastern countries, where a large number of students are participating in international training in an online form, again, what we're seeing is this next generation building strong associations from a positive perspective with online education. So that's a wave that we can't stop. The fourth and final thing is that online education potentially lowers cost, okay, not only for the providers, but particularly for the consumers of it. Where does it work? Where doesn't it work? That's the million-dollar set of questions. So here are 5 points that I want to run through, which discusses where online fails. Number 1, and I think this is the primary problem that we see in a lot of training offerings today. The courses and content is assembled en masse by people who are not content experts. It ends up informing people, giving them information, but it's not necessarily teaching them anything. So they can do a set of training and walk away with some knowledge about something, but can they really apply it? That's the ultimate goal of training, and if it doesn't convert into some sort of application or value generation, then it's a waste of time. Number 2, reducing content and quality in order to fit with online formats. And you'll see that when we talk about people having time-constrained days and an inability to be able to participate in multi-day classroom type training, then there's this mindset that if we shrink the time frame, then more people come to it. But that's not necessarily true, because when we shrink content, we're taking away value at the end of the day. And a better way to approach it is to ask the question, how do I deliver that content that gives them the value, but do it in such a way that they can access it in the time that they have available to them. Okay, number 3, there's a failure to connect with the preferred learning style of the audience. And this occurs in most situations where a presenter, unless they're thinking about it, is presenting information in a form that best suits the presenter. Now, that would work if they're talking to someone who's identical to themselves, but we all know that there's few of those, type of situations that actually occur, if any. So the failure to connect with a preferred learning style means that the audience may be getting exposed to good content, but they're not necessarily taking it in, or they're getting bored with it, or whatever it might be. Number 4, all of the training is online. Now, online training, it's called online training, but one of the problems is that it is all online. And I recently did some research about the different types of offerings, and we saw one offering in the area of Lean Six Sigma where they said, this course teaches you everything you need to know in order to pass the exam. So what they're trying to do is qualify people entirely on the basis of an online training mechanism, and then qualifying them with a specific certification through exam only, and it's got nothing to do with application. And again, if it's all online, then how do we know that it actually transgresses into something that adds value? So the 5th thing is that, and I see this as a failure, that is, you must be connected to the internet to do the training. So again, online training kind of gives the assumption, or alludes to the idea, that you need to be connected to the internet. But if that's the only mechanism for exposing yourself to it, then it limits the ability of you to be able to do it in certain locations and in certain time frames. So they would be 5 points that are worth considering when you're looking at different online options. So let's look at the opposite side of this. What is it that makes online training? When does online succeed? So here are 5 points to consider when that we would talk about when online succeeds. Number 1, the content comes from a practical application foundation. It actually educates people. It teaches people how to do certain things in the workplace so that the skill that they're taking on board can be utilized to produce some sort of value for the individual or the company that's hosting it. And any training that is undertaken that doesn't convert into some value, again, is probably a waste of time. It might tick some boxes, but it doesn't necessarily generate value. And training that can't be linked somehow to the bottom line, right, has a weakness in it. Number 2, the training touches multiple modalities. And what we're talking about here are the preferences of people for the way information is put in front of them. The question is, does it touch the visual modality? Does it touch the auditory modality? Does it touch people in an emotional or kinesthetic way? And when training is delivered in a form that touches multiple modalities, then it's more likely to fit with the preferences of a wider audience. The 3rd thing that helps online training succeed, when it's delivered in shorter course format or shorter lesson format, that gives the user increased flexibility. And it also gives them a sense of achievement when they achieve short-term type goals. So they complete a lesson in a short period of time. It doesn't mean the overall course needs to be shrunken. All we're saying here is that little pieces of it and little achievement points and little milestones can be achieved in order to achieve the bigger picture, which is the course or the qualification itself. So shorter course format, shorter lesson format gives more flexibility. The 4th thing is that all learning styles need to be covered in a blended training format. So all styles are covered through either reflection or thinking about how you apply it in work, or seeing it or touching it, or whatever it might be that sits within your preferred way of taking in information and learning it. And we need to touch all of those styles in the online format. But one of the things that we're seeing across the industry is that the people who tend to be delivering the better quality training are combining online training with classroom options. So if you look at some of the better MBA type level type qualifications in the world, there's a big component of it where they actually get together in forums and groups and workshops and physically work through stuff that relates to running a business. And I think the industry is pretty much convinced that the best training blends the lot together. You can do a little bit offline, you can do a bunch of it self-paced. The mechanical nature of something can be taught in your own home and at the pace that works for you, but the application of it may require that you get together or you are put in a position where all of the idiosyncrasies of the environment are being, put around you so that you can apply this in the right format. So the fifth point, the training can be progressed offline. So we can actually take, what we're saying here is we can take the training, we can do some of the work online, but we can walk away from the internet and we can continue to do parts of the course and then go back and consolidate it in an online format later on. And that gives you much more flexibility than having to be connected to the internet all the time. So let's take a look at the value proposition of online training. Is it commercially viable? Well, traditional training over probably the past 2 decades priced in the vicinity of $500 plus per day, certainly in Australia, and I think there's a fair bit of this reflected also in the American market. And when we say $500 plus, it means a TAFE college definitely focused on the $500 per day value. And a lot of the private enterprises and larger type seminar groups, they increase the cost of the training even up to $1,000 a day. So, a 4-day or 5-day course can cost in the vicinity of $2,000 to $10,000. So we're talking a lot of money in the normal classroom format. Now, today there are a couple of different ways we see that customers can. The number one approach is, first of all, to sell courses, or you go and buy a course. Now, we did some research this morning and we found that we can't ascertain some pricing without actually registering on the websites. So there's places where you go in, you get all the information about the course, and you can't actually find out how much the course costs. You have to register your name and get into the database in order to find that out. But what we did find is that generally those that we could see, where they're offering short courses that relate to lifestyle skills or specific business skills from a generic perspective, they're in the vicinity of $200 to $300 per course, per student. When we get into the Cert 4, the accredited type training, the Cert 4 and upwards, because I think they get into the diplomas and graduate diplomas and that type of thing, we're looking at $3,000 plus, and some of them go up to $8,000 and $10,000, so they're still quite expensive. But I think a large portion of a lot of that training, is done in a face-to-face environment. We looked at some of the Lean Six Sigma online training, and we found that the pricing from $1,000 upwards. And on the screen, what you'll see in front of you there, at the top one, you see the Seek Learning example, one of their courses, $295. Down below, this is one of the Lean Six Sigma online training programs, and the cost of this was $1,122 for the course. So I'm not sure of the duration of that particular one, but that's just type of some of the stuff that we saw. Now, in fact, they talk about approximately 120 hours of online training. So, the prices vary considerably, but that comes from the model of you would go in there and you would buy training. Okay, there's another model, and that's the way that we've approached it at AOBIL. We had a look around to see if there was more of these options. I believe there's one company that in America that gives kind of like an annual subscription offer for access to video packages. So it's closer to this option of what we would refer to as a membership option. Now, we decided to take this approach for a couple of reasons, because first of all, this approach means you're not actually memberships, and then you give members the content, and it gives a bit of peace of mind to the members themselves in that they have a lot more choice about the different courses they do without having to worry about money. And the second thing is nobody's actually trying to sell them and on-sell them the next course and that type of thing. So their exposure to the online service is a different situation. Pricing, and that's something that we need to do more research on around the world. We've chosen to price this at a $52 per month approach, and how that converts into value for an individual is that we could complete or a student program, and I'm using this specifically as an example because we just presented the example previously. They could complete that program in about 6 months. So 6 months at $52 a month, well, you can work out what the value is there. It ends up being much, much cheaper. And I think at the end of this, there's an offer there for you. You can go and try it out if you want and have a look at it yourself. So two options, just to backtrack on that. The first one is you can go and buy courses, and they range anywhere from $200 to $300 for short courses, and in the thousands of dollars for the longer courses and level qualifications. Or you can approach a membership type option where you become a member of an organization and exposed to all of the content. So in summary, first of all, there's an unstoppable drive towards new ways of learning. Is it going to be online? Well, it definitely will in the short to medium term. Online training we cannot avoid. It will always be there, probably in our foreseeable future. And will it turn into something else later on? Well, who knows? I don't think we have the technology for some of the things that we see in movies and that type of thing, but then again, maybe that just uploading straight into your brain may occur at some point. At this point, the drive towards online and the internet-based type learning is unstoppable. It will happen. The second thing is online training can deliver value if certain criteria are met. And we spoke about that. It delivers value, if we're not shrinking the content and just there to sell you some training so that we make money from you. That's not the goal. The goal is that you take away some content that you can apply and utilize to generate value for yourself and your organization, and it gives you the opportunity to build that resume and show in a practical way that you are committed to betterment and improvement and self-development. And organizations want to see that today. The third thing is not all training will deliver value. There's going to be training, and training on its own is not a value generator. It's the application of it that's going to generate value. So what we don't want to do is get information. What we want to do is develop skill we can apply. And the fourth thing is online training can deliver your costs quite significantly. Even if it's blended type training and has face-to-face portions and components, the cost reduction that comes with that can be quite significant, and it raises the value of it as an option for an organization. And if an organization isn't doing some form of online training today, it's only a matter of time. So the early adopters are going to get the most benefit out of it, but everyone's going to have to adopt it at some point in time. So there you go. I'm just wondering if you have any questions about anything we've covered at this point in time.
Attendees. So the first one we have is, you said something about offline training. How do you do online training but not on the internet?
That's a great question. I think there's going to be multiple ways that people do it, whether they can download an app or they can have a software package somehow integrated on their computer that connects and synchronizes with some server. I think that's one option. We've chosen to follow the option where people can download it. We've kept it nice and simple. They can download the content of the course, so they can print out the written material, they can download and watch from their own computer the video material, and we're also looking at the whole viability of converting everything into an audible content. And I think it's that ability to be able to print, play, turn it into an audio and that type of thing that is going to be the more dominant ways of approaching offline training that relates to an online course. And we're exploring those ones, and our approach is that once you've done the offline component, then you go online and you consolidate it and you wrap it up at the end. So it might be, the examination questions, for example, are printed, but then once you've answered those, you just go online and you just finish those in the online portal to make sure that the quizzes are marked and you can progress to the next course. So that's fundamentally how we approach it.
That sounds pretty awesome, George. Do you think $52 is too cheap and that might stop people from joining your AOBIL membership?
Yeah, that's something we've thought about for a long time now. And a lot of people, most people will associate low cost with low value. However, the research that we did, is pointing to the fact that training has a downward trend in terms of pricing because of availability. And we could price it at the same, price base as everyone else, but that just puts us in the same pool. And the problem with that is most people approach training from a cost perspective primarily, and I'm pretty sure that they might, if they find multiple options, cost will be a driver of it. So we chose that number for a particular reason. One, it relates to less than $1.50 per day, which is just a number that resonates with us. Number two, it transfers the ownership to us to expose ourselves to a broader market, and we're not making significant profits from one person. If we just, if we just have one member, we're not going to succeed, that's for sure. So the onus is on us is to offer much broader value, much greater value, in order to be exposed to a broader market who accept that what we're offering is of value to them. And the other thing that we've thrown in here is the fact that we want people to try it out. We go, before you look at a price and decide that that's too cheap, then jump on board and give it a run and a test and make a decision based on facts, make a decision that's based on some experience, and I think you'll find that the value for money is, quite extreme. So that's why we're offering people test pilot memberships. They can jump in. They're not going to be hard sold or on-sold or anything like that. They're just going to be offered an opportunity to try it out. If it adds value, then they would continue on to the unlimited access account. If not, then we probably missed the mark, but that hasn't happened to date. So that's our approach.
Thank you. Obviously, the benefits of studying online with AOBIL are extensive, and thank you, George, for running us through them.
You're welcome.
Wow. Flexible, anywhere, anytime, and at your own pace. That's an amazing content, proven core skills that are applicable in the real world, and there are genuine options to do this at low cost. In closing, I'd like to thank you, the attendees, for taking the time to explore an exciting avenue of self and career development. I look forward to talking to you again soon.